What is up, guys? Welcome to part 3 of how to put yourself into movies. So today we're going to be looking at green screen footage. So we've got our clean plate that we created, we've got our footage that we shot on the green screen. Now we're going to be learning how to key that out in After Effects, and then we're also going to be going over some compositing, some VFX tips to really take your footage to the next level if you're really trying to blend that in and make it look like you were part of that movie. So first, let's talk about why we use green screen.
Just do it!
So digital camera sensors are actually more sensitive to green than they are any other color because they have more green photo sites than they do red or blue. So they're actually more sensitive to that green light, which is really cool. I think it's actually, there's like double the amount of green than there are red or blue. The other reason we use green is because it's far away from skin tone. So red, magenta, and the skin tone, green's kind of on the opposite side of that color wheel, so it's far away. So it's a good way to separate your subject from the background. So what we're gonna do is bring some footage into After Effects. We're gonna be using Primatte here, which is an expensive plugin. So if you have that, this will be a tutorial on how to use that, but we're also gonna use Keylight later in the video if you don't have Primatte or if you're just trying to do something quickly in After Effects. But you can still get really good results from Keylight as well. So we'll go over all that. So the footage we're gonna be keying in this tutorial is gonna be raw footage, and it's gonna be in the Cinema DMG format. So we were shooting on FS7s and we were recording to the Odyssey 7Q+, which gave us Cinema DMG. Now it's kind of a clunky format to use. It wasn't the best, it was pretty slow. But it gave really high quality results, full 4K and 12-bit, which is really nice when trying to key stuff out. Now, the FS7 also records 1080 proxies at the same time, so we're able to use those to edit in Premiere quickly and then only key out the parts that we absolutely needed. So if you don't have proxies already, you may want to create those and edit those if you're doing a longer scene. If you're only doing like 1 or 2 shots, you're not going to need to do that. But we have our project in Premiere, so we're going to bring that in to After Effects and start the keying process. So we have our proxies here on the top layer and then our raw clips on the bottom. So what I'm going to do first is duplicate these raw clips so I don't lose any information, I don't lose any of the cuts I made, just in case the link between After Effects and Premiere doesn't work, because a lot of times it doesn't. So then we're going to right click and replace with After Effects composition. So we're going to bring that in After Effects, and we've got it in our composition here. It's got all of our cuts that we made in Premiere, which is really nice. So we know how much we need to key out. So you'll just have to be mindful because After Effects does bring in Cinema DNG clips as still frames sometimes, and sometimes it will bring it in as an actual image sequence. So you just need to be mindful of that. If it does bring it in as a still, all you need to do is right click, hit replace footage, and then click on file, and then go to your raw folder that has the Cinema DNGs or whatever it is. Click on that first DNG, which is that 0000. Click on that, make sure camera raw sequence is checked at the bottom, click OK, and that should bring in that image sequence as a video file inside After Effects. And when you do that, it's also going to bring up this camera raw dialog, which is really nice. So what you want to do is go into the camera raw tab and boost up the greens. So everybody's green screen is gonna be a different color green each time, so it's not gonna work perfectly across the board, but you wanna go in and boost your greens up, maybe even take down the magentas a little bit, so that way you have some separation between subject and background. So go into presets, you can click on that little page icon and that will add a new preset. You're gonna save that as a green preset. So I knew that I can come back to this when I need to key. So I click on that preset, hit OK, and that's gonna apply it to the footage. Now I'm gonna take all those individual clips and pre-compose those into a new composition and rename that. And now I'm going to use that layer to work off of. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with Primatte. So the first thing we'll do is we'll add the Primatte keyer effect to that layer, and then we will be under selection. We're going to choose the base color sampler, choose that little eyedropper, and click a green right next to our subject. And that's going to get most of our green keyed out right away. So then what we're going to do is go over to view and change the view to matte instead of comp. And so that's going to give us a black and white image. So the white is what's keeping, and then the black is what's being keyed out. So then I'm gonna go over to clean background, and we're gonna have our little point selector, and we're just gonna make some points where the background is still showing through and we're still seeing to that green. So we wanna make sure everything behind him is black, everything on him and his body is white. And so we'll do that and just continue to make points and continue to get all of that green gone. Once we have all that finished, we'll switch over to clean foreground, and then we'll click on that, and then we'll clean up the foreground, which is the subject, and we'll just use that point selector to get all that foreground back into our image, because we don't want to key out anything on the subject. So a lot of times reflective things like buttons or like somebody's watch is going to get caught in that green, and so you just want to make sure all those things come back in. And then I'll move over to the beginning of the composition and make sure his shoes are white, so they're going to reflect that green pretty heavily. And you see on the edge here, it kind of got messed up when I just chose that green. So then I'm going to scrub through the composition and make sure throughout these clips that the key is staying the same, it's still selecting the subject and not shifting around, none of the lighting changed, none of the settings on Primatte changed. Now we're gonna go down below selection and go into correction. And so on the correction, you can use something called defocus and shrink. That's what I usually like to use. I would start between 3 and 5 for the defocus, and you can go a little bit higher if you have higher resolution footage, but with 1080, I would definitely stay there. And I'll use the shrink matte to shrink that down a little bit and get a little bit of a finer key, and I'll go about 5 on that one too. You can change these. On some of the clips, I had to go all the way up to 20, but this is a good starting point, and you wanna make sure that it's looking good for your footage. So now that I've got the key looking good, I'm gonna do one last thing, and so I'm gonna add what's called a garbage matte. So I'm just gonna add a mask around the things like this boom mic and the light that snuck into the frame, and it's not that big a deal because it didn't overlap with our subject, so I'm just gonna mask those things out real quick. Now I've got my key, and I'm feeling good about how that looks. So what I'm gonna do now is duplicate this layer that we're working off right now, this pre-comp with all those clips in it, and instead of key, I'm gonna call it graded. So now I'm gonna have 2 different clips. So I'll do the same thing with all my footage. Then I'm gonna duplicate all the clips that I brought into key, and I'm gonna rename all of those with the word graded at the end. So I know those are the ones I'm grading, the other ones I'm keying. Now I'm gonna go into the clips that we designated for grading, and I'm gonna go into the camera raw settings. And to do that, I'm gonna right click and choose interpret footage, and then I'm gonna click on main, or you can do Option Command G. And then if you go down to the bottom left, right where it says more options, if you click on that, it's actually gonna bring up that camera raw dialog, which is really cool. So now what I'm gonna do is color grade the footage to how I want it to look when it's gonna be piped back in to the compositing scene. So at this point, I'm gonna get a pretty basic neutral look for it, and I don't want it to be too dark or too contrasty. I'm gonna get nice shadow levels and nice skin tones and nice highlights, make sure we're not blowing anything out. Because the next step is gonna be exporting this to ProRes for the compositing, because compositing with Cinema DNG Raw was just not an option for us. It was just gonna take way too long. So now I'm gonna get this to a neutral look and then save that as a preset as well called grade. So once you're finished with that, apply that to your footage. So then inside your graded composition, click on the layer that you want to replace and find that layer in your project window. Then you want to hold Option, click on that layer, and drag that into the composition over top of the layer that you're replacing, and you'll see it renamed to the graded clip, and you'll know that it worked. And do that to replace all those files, so now your graded composition has all graded clips in it. Then what we'll do is we'll bring in that graded composition, which is the same as our keyed composition. We'll bring that in, and now the only difference is what's inside that comp is actually the graded clips, not the keyed clips. So we're gonna use the track matte and choose alpha, and that's basically gonna key out our footage from that first green screen layer that we had. So now we got those raw clips with the full quality, but are seeing through to that green screen key. So now we can make any adjustments that we need to with the raw footage, and it'll still export out with that green screen key that we just made. So the one thing I did to finish it off with Primatte is I added a Primatte keyer effect to the graded clips. So instead of adding the Primatte keyer layer and suppressing that green spill on the original layer, what I did was I added that to the graded layer. So then what I did, the only thing I added was the spill killer. So I clicked enable and I chose the color mode as green. And then I just played with the range and tolerance and strength until it basically killed all that green off the original footage. So that's a nice way of removing that green without affecting that original key. All right, so now that we feel good about that composition, we feel good about the key, the grade is all there, everything is good to go. So what we're gonna do now is export that to a high quality ProRes, so we're able to bring that back into After Effects into our keying composition. But not just any high quality ProRes will work. You need to choose ProRes 4444. You need to also make sure that you choose RGB+Alpha. So that's gonna give you just your subject and not any of the background, and it's not gonna flatten your layers and export with black. It's gonna export with that alpha channel embedded into it. All right, so now we're moving on to Keylight. So with Cinema DNG, if you're bringing it straight into After Effects, you're not gonna wanna drag and drop. You're gonna actually go into your project window, double click to import or Command I, and you wanna find your clip. So let's go ahead and search for our clip. So we're gonna be working on a clip from the Grinch for this section. So click on your first 00000 and make sure camera raw sequence is selected. Click open, and that should open that up as a video. Oh, camera raw 12.3, what's going on here? ACRD file, okay, sure, cool. Cool. It's gonna bring up that camera raw dialog right away. I'm just gonna go ahead and hit OK for now, because we can always change that later. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this set up. So I'm gonna set up my first composition with our clip here, and we're gonna call this Grinch Key Master. And we're gonna pretend like this has a bunch of cuts in it. So we're gonna pre-compose this and call this Grinch Key. All right, we got our Grinch Key now. So we're gonna go into this layer. And let's go ahead and select our footage, and we're gonna hit interpret footage and click on main or Option Command G. Like I said, in the Primatte section, you can now click on more options, and that's gonna bring up your camera raw dialog. So this is really cool. Unfortunately, you can't change which clip it's referencing, which is really annoying. But I mean, which frame it's referencing. So like I have this frame here. But one little nice workaround is you can cancel that, go into your raw clip, find your raw footage, like the actual raw folder. So you can bring in any DNG file, and then that one will work, and you can make your adjustments here. So I'm gonna bring up the exposure a little bit, contrast a little bit, shadows a little. And then what we're gonna do is basically the point here is we wanna bring up the greens as much as we can and suppress a little bit of the other colors that aren't green, like the reds and magentas. So we're gonna go into, all right, this camera raw is now looking different. I don't know, I've never seen this before. This must have just updated in the new After Effects, but okay, this looks a little more like Lightroom. That's cool, I like it. All right, so let's go to saturation. Let's take our magentas down and our reds down a little bit. Bump those greens up. I bump those up way up, and probably the yellows too, because some of that yellow is gonna be in that green. So bump that yellow up. That's gonna give us a nice green range to play with, so we can also play with the luminance a little bit. You don't want it too dark, you don't want it too bright, because it's gonna start feeding into other things. So you wanna just bring it up a little bit. All right, so now we're good here. So let's go into our, how do you get to presets? This whole camera raw thing is brand new. So you're gonna wanna go down to presets, which the new camera raw dialog, it's this little circle little thingy. You're gonna create a preset, and we'll call this a Grinch key. So now we got our little preset down here, looking good. Click on OK. Now it's only gonna apply to that still frame that we brought in because we couldn't change the frame that we were looking at. So now we need to go to our DNG image sequence, click on interpret footage, click on main, click more options, and bring that dialog back up, go to presets, click on Grinch key. Now that we'll apply it to our video footage. So we take that DNG still out of there because we have a preset saved. So now what we're gonna do, let's skip ahead a little bit. Oh, look, there's me, hi. And as I was saying, DNG works pretty slowly. Now what we'll do is we're gonna add our effect. We're gonna go down to keying and add Keylight 1.2. I don't know about 1.1 or 1.0, never actually seen that before. What we'll start with is we'll start with the screen color. So that's gonna be our main selection. And we're gonna go right next to our subject, click a green, and a lot of that green is gonna go away, so that's nice. So right now the view is on the final results. So we'll switch that over to screen matte. So now we can see just like we'd had in Primatte, we have our black background and our white foreground. So now we're gonna make sure that this background becomes more black, foreground becomes more white. So what you don't have is you don't have the little foreground clickers like you did in Primatte, which was really nice. But what we'll do here in Keylight is we'll mess with the screen gain. And as you can see, as you bring that down, the contrast goes down. As you bring it up, the contrast goes up. So we wanna bring it up a little bit, and then we're gonna go down to our screen matte. And so that's how we're gonna make a lot of our adjustments here. So we'll check on the black, and as we bring that up, you can see up top there, that little green area, that green highlight is going away a little bit. So with our clip white, what we're gonna do is we're not gonna worry about this ring right now because that we can key out in a different layer. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our clip white and bring that down a little bit so it works right on our subject, but it doesn't go too far to mess with these edges. So that looks pretty good right there. And for this clip, we actually weren't worried about anything underneath this circle right here. So this cardboard and all this stuff, these stands, none of that's really gonna matter. It's really all that's above this circular little piece here. So now we're gonna go to our screen shrink and grow, and we're just gonna shrink that a little bit. So we'll shrink that down just a few pixels. Now we're gonna look at our softness. If you go too far on the softness, it's gonna look really blurry. So we wanna be careful with that. So let's go ahead and zoom in, and I'm just gonna take a quick look, and that's looking pretty good. So I'm gonna soften it up just a little bit. Might even be too much there. Let's go to 1, yeah. Let's go with 1 for now. And that's looking pretty good so far. Let's drop a little background in there just to see how it's working. That's looking pretty good. That's pretty clean here, pretty clean here. Let's scrub a little bit and see how it looks. Yeah, not bad, not bad. And let's take a look at our source, just what the original looked like. So it is cutting off a little bit of that hair. We're probably gonna lose a little bit of that just based on resolution because he's pretty far back in that frame. All right, let's go to our final result. And that looks pretty good. So again, we're just worried about this top part, and I'm pretty happy with that. As you can see here on the orange, it's pretty clean all around. And like I said earlier, we can key out this ring that's around him in a different key. So we're gonna go ahead and do that now. Go ahead and make a duplicate of your keyed layer and your graded layer. So now you've got 2 of those, and just go ahead and turn off the first one. We'll keep that one locked so we don't mess with those. Then on the bottom 2, we're gonna start with this. So we're gonna actually change the key that we have here. So we're gonna have to go into Keylight and reset. So go back to our green here. Now what we'll do is go to the screen color again, and then this time we're gonna click and choose this dark green inside of this ring instead of this bright green on the background, because we're just keying out the ring now. So click on that. Now even the background green goes too, but we don't want this as our main keyed layer because it's gonna take off too much detail from the hair. So we just wanna do this for the ring. So let's go ahead and switch over to screen matte. Now we got all of this green on this side taken care of, but we're still missing this side over here. So we're gonna go ahead and go back into our screen matte and mess with some of these settings here. All right, let's check out our final result. All right, so as you can see, it is cutting into the detail on his hair and other places here, but we're really just worried about this area right here around his torso where it's intersecting with that. Now, if we turn this off real quick, what we tried to do is we tried to put some blue tape here to do a blue key instead of a green key, and then that way when his hand moved in here, we could just key out the blue, but part of this stand is actually poking out here and here. So those are some things we're gonna have to manually mask out if it's noticeable. It may not even be noticeable in the final. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and turn off our keyed layer now, turn back our graded layer on, and that's seeing through to the alpha channel, so it's using that same key. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a mask on this layer. All right, and we're gonna do a mask right around where this layer is. They're gonna intersect, so nice precise key around this thing. So this is really the only part we're using for this key. So go back to our alpha map. Okay, so we've made our mask here, and we're really only using this middle section just to bridge the gap between the background green and the green on the wooden ring. That's gonna end up being the trash chute. So let's go ahead and turn on our layer that we did at first. That has everything. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a garbage mat here and do a little bit of overlap so we can put those two together. So let's see. So I turned the opacity down, and now I'm just gonna make a little mat here so that we can blend these two together. And as you can see, we've got the top half here. We got the top half here with our nice key, and then a little bit of a worse key going on here, but that's needed to key out the ring because the ring wasn't lit as well as we lit the background. So now you've got the ring gone, and you've kept your nice key that we made on the background. So you probably want to make another duplicate and do a third key below everything, and then add another key light, and we want to just keep the shadow underneath him. Then add a mask to only keep that shadow layer, and just go ahead and completely desaturate that. Now you've got a shadow here from his arm and a shadow under his hand, and that's gonna appear on the top of the trash chute. So don't be afraid to use multiple layers and do different keys where you need them to be if you have multiple different greens or different objects in your frame. So now what we're gonna do is same thing that we did earlier. We're gonna duplicate this Grinch key composition in the project window. We're gonna name this Grinch Graded, and we're gonna bring this into the composition now. And we're gonna duplicate our clip as well in the project window and call that Graded. And now we're gonna go into our Grinch Graded comp, and we're gonna replace this graded clip with the original clip. And then what we'll do is we will right click on our graded, interpret, main, more options, and now we're gonna bring up our camera raw dialog. Now we can actually grade this and remove that preset that we had earlier. So now you're gonna grade your footage how you want it to look on export. So after you export this, you bring that back into After Effects for compositing. You want that to have just basically a neutral look. You want to have good skin tones and good shadow level, good highlight level, all that good stuff. So just go ahead and grade that, bring that to a point you want. All right, now that you've set that, let's go back to our master composition. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna choose Alpha Matte for our graded clip. So now we have our graded footage that's looking through to the raw data with our grade applied to it that doesn't have any effects on it, which is really nice. The only thing that's happening is it's looking through to the alpha of our key from Keylight. So now what we're gonna do is add a Lumetri color effect to our layer. So we're gonna go up here to our green, our HSL, and we're gonna choose the green. So now we'll select a little bit of that green, and then we'll just bring the saturation down on that. So bring the saturation down a little bit, but we also just wanna remove some of that green, so we're gonna add some magenta to it. And see, as you add that magenta, that green pretty much goes away and you can't even see it anymore. So let's see before, after. And we do have some green spill here on the edge. Let's see if we can add Keylight back to this. So let's make another instance of Lumetri, and we're gonna reset this, and then we're gonna choose the little green right here on the edge and see if we can choose that green there and bring some of that down, and then bring the tint out of that as well. With those two Lumetri layers, we've got a little bit of green spill gone off of our subject, which is nice. So that's gonna help blend it when you start compositing this footage in. Okay, so now that we have our key complete, you may have run into some issues where your green screen background didn't key out perfectly and you have to go in and manually correct some things. Or if you had some motion blur, the key's not gonna get that perfectly, so you may have some weird edges. Make sure you don't have any of those things going on, and if you do, you wanna go in manually and add a mask around those things that the computer couldn't really figure out, so you're gonna have to kind of tell it where the green is. So if you have some motion blur things, or if you have anything that's like coming in front of your subject that you didn't mean to have there, just go ahead and fix those things first. Go fix them in this step right here. You wanna leave the keying step with everything perfectly keyed out. You don't wanna have any green left when you move on to the compositing. All right, so now we're good with that key, so we're gonna export that out to ProRes and we're gonna move on to compositing. But not just any high quality ProRes will work. You need to choose ProRes 4444. You need to also make sure that you choose RGB+Alpha. So here we're gonna be switching over to Jesse Henning's work. So we were working on things in tandem. So this scene right here is gonna be composited and graded and on VFX done by Jesse Henning. Go check out his work at Henning Animation and VFX. I'll link that below in the description. This dude is talented, go check him out. So what we're gonna be looking at here is the scene from the movie Elf, and this is the first one that we did. So go ahead and bring your subject in. And we're gonna look at the reference image here and the reference video to see what size Will Ferrell is in the scene, and we're gonna match up that size with our pastor. And we'll just bring that in, line him up, and once we got it sized right, what we're gonna do is we're also gonna track the movement of Will. So Will Ferrell's moving across this iceberg, so we need to track that movement so our pastor moves across the same path. And to get that tracked, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go up to the animation tab at the top, and we're gonna click track in Mocha. And that's gonna apply a Mocha effect to our footage. And we're just gonna go ahead and click on this Mocha icon here, and that will open us up the Mocha plugin for After Effects. Then you click on your X spline here, which is like kind of like the pen tool in After Effects. And then you just wanna make a little mask here. And so we're just gonna select a few points on this iceberg, and we're gonna track that forward using the little T buttons over here. Once that's done, we're gonna save that, and now we can apply that export back in After Effects. So now he's kind of stuck to that iceberg because he's tracking along with him now. And so once you've got your movement tracked and you've got the size lined up, now you can move into color grading. And so obviously the idea here with grading is you're not going for your own look, your own style. You're going to match with what the background is and what the movie is. So you want to pay good detail to the reference image too. How is he being lit? What colors are hitting him? Whatever you feel comfortable in grading works best. But here's a couple of tips and tricks that might work well for you as you're trying to composite him onto the green screen and get those colors right. So now we're gonna jump way forward in time. So after we completed this project, I looked into this process a little bit more, and I found some other tips that may help you color grade your footage even faster if you're trying to do it quickly, or just give you a little extra color matching ability. So the first one that I learned is from Josh Olufemii, so you guys can check out his channel below as well. In one of his videos, he showed how to use the curves layer to match to the background. So we're gonna try to do that here. Under Effect, we're gonna color correction and choose curves. And then what we're gonna do is change this to our red channel. Then we're just gonna bring this down until it matches up with the reds of this comp. So it looks like it's starting to get a little bit green. So we'll bring that back up right about there. We'll go into our green channel and we'll pull that down a little bit. And that's starting to get too pink there. So bring that back up, kind of balance that out. And then we'll go to our blue channel and we'll pull that down. And it looks like we need to go the other way. We need to add some blue into our footage here. And that's getting pretty close. Let's go back to our green because I feel like we have too much magenta going on now. Bring that back up. That looks pretty close. Now I'm definitely gonna add a hue saturation layer here just to kill some of this green to start with. So before we even get to the curves, let's just try to kill some of these greens. Green saturation down, nice. So now let's turn on our curves. That's pretty close, and just for a couple clicks, that's actually looking really good. So other effect is called, let's open up our effects and presets, and we're gonna type in CC Toner. So we're gonna add that to our clip here. And what we're gonna do is you've now got highlights, midtones, and shadows. And I learned this tip from Fourmy, so if you guys wanna check out his channel as well. I don't really know how to pronounce his name the correct way, but Lauren's behind this green screen. So Lauren, can you pronounce it correctly?
François Fourmy.
Awesome. Can you say it louder so the audio can pick up?
No, because I'm French. François Fourmy.
Anyway, I learned that tip from him. So you can... So you have your highlights, midtones, and shadows here, and you can click this little eyedropper, and you want to click on the highlights that are in the background. So let's choose this highlight right here, and my midtones, this is about a midtone here. Click on that. And then shadows, let's find a really dark one back here. There's some good shadows there. Oh, what the heck happened there? Let's choose a different shadow. Let's choose this one. There we go. Now I look really blue. So you have this little thing right here. You can blend with the original because it may give you too much, but you can hit a little bit of that blending. That'll bring some of your original skin tones back in. But with this lighting and this bounced light, you actually would look really blue. So you don't want to go too far away from that original. But if you do want to preserve some skin tones, you can bring that back. That looks pretty good right there. So you got CC Toner that you can use, and you've got your curves that you can bring down everything. Is that what the curves look like? That's a much different look. Let's add them together. Yeah. See what it looked like before the hue saturation. Yeah, that got a lot of the green out of there. brought some of those organic blues in the highlights and shadows. Let me bump this up a little bit so we're kind of blending it. Yeah, let's go 60. All right, guys, so there's a quick way of grading your footage using the curves layer and using the CC toner adjustment in After Effects. So let's jump back into our compositing with Jesse now. All right, and so what Jesse did is first he added the color balance adjustment in After Effects. He started to change the shadow blue balance and move that up to 45. And then we went to the midtone blue balance and changed that to around 19. And then we want to bring our exposure down because we want to match everything else. As you can see over here, this elf dude's looking pretty dark. So we're gonna bring Passer down. And then we want to bring out the highlight blue balance and bring that up a little bit. And then take some of the reds out of the skin tones as well in those highlights. So we're gonna bring that down about 45. And so all this is kind of just adjusting it, trial and error, trying to figure out exactly what's gonna look best in the scene. And if you have a reference person in the shot or something that you can reference, it's really helpful. Then to finish it off, you can add a Lumetri color and adjust some of those shadows and some of the curves and the colors inside the shadows, midtones, and highlights even further to get a really fine adjustment. Okay, so we're gonna continue on here in our compositing journey. And one thing that you want to do is you want to take a look at the resolution between your background and your footage. If you're shooting on the Blackmagic Ursa Pro 12K and the file that you pulled for the still frames is like a 720 file from YouTube, you're definitely going to want to blur and downscale that high-res footage to match your background. A lot of the times we ended up just putting a Gaussian blur on our image, just a little bit, just to blur that out so it doesn't feel as sharp and like all this resolution in our keyed footage, because you want that to be able to blend. You want it to feel like it was filmed part of the movie. So it may not be fun to downscale your footage or to blur it out, but you want to prioritize your footage looking like it's realistic and really in the scene over the quality of your footage. So the reason we shot it in 4K is because we wanted to get the best quality when we're keying out the green screen, and then we know we can downscale it to whatever we need it to be. So the next thing you want to do is you want to add a correct shadow. You want to add a shadow under their feet, or if it's a really harsh light coming at them, you may want to add a longer shadow that's going off the side. So for a longer shadow, you'll want to take just a copy, a duplicate of your footage, and then in 3D, you're going to transform it down so it's kind of like a longer shadow, and pay attention to where the light's coming from. So in this scene, we want to have our shadow going away from the light, which is this direction. Then you want to make it black and blur it out. So you don't want the actual texture and the detail of the person on the ground. You want it to just be black shadow because it's just making the ground darker wherever he's walking. And then you want to add a harsh dark shadow under the feet, track that along with the feet as you're going, and pay attention again to your original footage and your reference and see where the shadows are coming there, if there's any extra shadows, if there's any shadows on the actual person. That's really gonna make it realistic and make them feel like they're really in the scene, because now there's another element interacting with the scene with that shadow. So that's really important. So the next thing you wanna do is you wanna add noise. If you wanna do it quick, what you can do is you can just add a layer of grain, a layer of noise over top of everything, over top of your footage and your background at the same time. So it kind of blends them together with that noise. But if you want to get detailed with it, what I did was I actually went into the movie and I found a place where there was a little bit of noise bouncing in the background, and it was a clean colored background. So I desaturated the color and I just took a piece of that noise and I made sure the exposure wasn't like too different between that little mask. So I made a little mask of that and I duplicated it a bunch of times and made a full 1080 frame of that noise. So now I have the actual original noise from the film. Then what you want to do is make sure the exposure is right. So you want to bring the exposure up or down a little bit depending on where it is, but you want it to be right at that like middle gray, 50% gray. Then when you bring that layer in over top of your footage and the background plate at the same time, you want to set your blend mode to overlay. And so that's really just going to give you those noise like jitters back and forth. The good thing about that is you're getting the true film grain from the movie. And so you're not adding in your own little noise. And every film has a different grain like style to it and texture to it. So that's a good way to get the actual texture. And you may not be able to do that. In some of the movies we were working on, we didn't have that. So we just added in some normal noise. So you can add in noise from After Effects, or if you have Magic Bullet Looks, you can add in their renoiser effect, which really slows down your computer a lot, but looks really good. So there's a couple different ways you can do that, but you want to just pay attention to what the noise looks like in the movie as a whole and in the scene and just match that up. Adding that noise can really make it feel realistic in the scene. So now what we want to do is want to add in any VFX elements. So this is going to be a little more complicated, and you don't have to add the step if you don't want to, or if you're not sure on how to do this yet, that's fine. I'll just give you a little breakdown of what we did. There's a couple different scenes that needed snow, and in one of the Polar Express scenes, we actually had the train car moving. And so we had snow in the background of the windows, and we had that like flying past. So we masked out all of the windows, and we added some snow and added a really long blur effect on the snow and had that going so it looked like the train car was still moving. And then in another scene in Polar Express, we had some snow falling out the window. So again, we masked out the windows, had the snow just falling behind. In Elf though, what we did was we had a lot of moving parts on this scene where he's floating in on that iceberg. So we had to rebuild the sky, and so we took little pieces of the sky that were clean in other parts of the movie and didn't have like that big whale thing or elf walking through the scene. And so we took those pieces and kind of looped them together and rebuilt the sky. So we have a clean sky just moving behind our subject. And then same thing with the water. It took a lot of trial and error to figure out what to do with the water because there's a lot of things that were over top of it and getting in the way. So we found a couple of stock elements from different websites, put that water together, made it look like it was moving, and then put that underneath the iceberg. And Jesse did a killer job on this water and the sky because like everything looked like it was just from the movie. So what you can do now is you can kind of composite everything down and add a handheld camera effect. And if you add a little bit of camera shake, it feels like it's handheld. And now what you're doing is you're taking your clean plate and your subject and you're moving them at the same time. So that's another like layer that will add to make it look like it's realistic. There's a lot of different handheld like presets you can buy, or a lot of them are for free too. And DaVinci has its own camera like handheld preset, and it's actually really good. So you can use that for free as well. But just that little bit of handheld camera like brings everything together. So then once you have that handheld shake, you can add a crop over top of that. And so we cropped ours to 2.35:1, which is kind of the standard anamorphic ratio. But you can crop yours down a little bit, but that also hides some of your camera shake. So if it's moving around a little bit, you have the black bars at the top and bottom that are kind of cropping that out. But it also like just makes it feel more like a movie and hide some of those imperfections that you may have on the top and bottom. All right, so that's the last step in our process. So one more thing that can help sell that this is part of your movie is the transitions in and out. So like we've shown before in the movie Elf, we had him kind of floating in on this iceberg. In the Polar Express, he kind of jumped out of that moving train car. It's part of the movie. All of a sudden we're cutting and he's coming in on a train car, and you don't even have a chance to realize that it's not part of the movie anymore. We had him crawling out of the trash chute. We had him walking in while the Grinch is walking away like at the same time in another scene. But a lot of these take some pre-production, so make sure you plan this stuff ahead of time. Any of those transitions you can do where it feels so seamless, like it's part of the original movie. And it was cool too, because after the first transition, people started to like anticipate it, like, oh, when's it gonna come out next? So you have that like excitement built up, so you have some cool opportunities to like add realism, but also add some fun. How you're gonna bring the subject in and out, so.
As you leave, we're going to have some piping hot chocolate for each of you.
That's one last tip for you. So guys, thank you so much for watching this tutorial today. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Please like the video if you liked it. Comment down below. I'd love to hear what you guys are working on. I'd love to see some of these clips. If you guys are putting yourself into a movie or working on a project like this, I would love to see it. So leave a link down below. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. Hit that notification bell so you can see all the new videos coming out, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Jesse do the green screen and all that?
Yeah.
Videos? Yeah.